Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction where the Russians began offensive operation. Currently it's very difficult to understand what are the exact purposes and tasks of the armed forces of Russian Federation, but one thing we know for sure that according to different pro-Russian resources, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to enter the village by the name of Velyka and to dig in deeper on the eastern outskirts of the settlement. Also, we have one video with FPV drone attacks. Most likely the Ukrainians were trying to send additional reinforcements and reserves with the purpose to counterattack or to stabilize the situation, but the Ukrainian forces were discovered and destroyed with FPV drone attacks. Most likely the village of Velyka is located in the gray zone or maybe in the contested area, and nobody controlled this territory, but either both the Russians and the Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group are able to enter this territory. As for the different military experts, especially from the pro-Russian side, reported that most likely the Russians are planning to attack in the direction of Maltakmachka. I'm not sure about this. Obviously, the Russians, by taking under control the village of Velyka, want to take under control the territories that located inside of this red line, but most likely the Russians are planning to attack in the northern direction from the village of Mirne and Bagate, so with the purpose to take under control the villages of Charivne, Novosilovska and Gulyai-Polskaya. If the Russians are able to take these settlements under control along 0814 road, then the Russians will be able to cut the territory in two, and the most important, to make logistic and communications between the town of Orekhov and town of Gulyai-Polye more difficult. The Ukrainians in this case will be forced to use another road for the communications, of course, which will give the Russians some benefits in further offensive operations in the direction of Gulyai-Polye, both Gulyai-Polye and Orekhov. So I see the situation as is. Now let's talk about the Velyka Novosilka direction. We have a lot of very interesting updates. We have changes on the ground that were confirmed by different videos, and we have changes on the ground that were provided by different mappers. The Ukrainian sources are saying that the situation in the Velyka Novosilka is very difficult. The Ukrainian right flank of Velyka Novosilka continues to crumble. In turn, Velyka Novosilka is a flank for both Kurakhove and Gulyai-Polye. If the Russian armed forces manage to capture it, it will be very convenient for them to operate in the direction of these two cities. So this article is talking about the town of Kurakhove and the town of Gulyai-Polye, and according to them, the town of Velyka Novosilka is the flank for both directions. Furthermore, according to the statement of the soldier of the armed forces of Ukraine on the ground, he reported that on the right flank, the Russians have pressed Novodarivka and advanced 1 kilometer north of the Rivnopol towards Novosilka. If the Russian armed forces captured Novosilka and Novokamar, then Velyka Novosilka will be surrounded. This article, the author of this article reported that the Russians managed to advance for another kilometer in the direction of the village by the name of Novosilka, so summarizing everything towards the road 0510. This is the road between the town of Velyka Novosilka itself and the town of Gulyai-Polye. So we are talking about this road, and if the Russians are able to take, according to the article of the post, control over Novosilka, this road would be cut by the Russians. And another village the author was talking about is the settlement of Novokamar. He also stated that the Russians managed to advance in the direction of this village, and if the Russians are able to take this village under control, this is going to be the complete disaster for the Ukrainians on the territory of Velyka Novosilka, and according to him, the village would be completely encircled by the Russians. So this is approximately the first Russian target and the first Russian goal to attack in the northern direction from Rivnopol, and the Russians are doing this right now. And according to the village of Novokamar, this is the next Russian target. But to take this village, first of all, the Russians need to secure the village of Razdolne, and according to information we have, this is exactly what the Russians are doing right now. Today we have changes on the ground, and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that indeed the Russians managed to enter the territory of the settlement and to take the first streets by the name of Sadova. So the first street was captured. The Russians continue advancing. The Ukrainians currently haven't managed to stabilize the situation. And while the Russians are attacking in the direction of Razdolne and trying to secure the territory, another Russian group conducted several attacks on the line between Shakhtarskaya and Novokamar. In this video, we can see another group of the armored force of Russian Federation with a significant number of tanks, personnel, carriers, armored fighting vehicles, and many other different types of equipment that were heading towards the 05-18 road and then towards the village of Novokamar. Very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians were trying to slow the Russians down with our counter-artillery fire, with FPV drone strikes, but we see that the Ukrainians haven't managed to stop the Russians. The Russians managed to reach the target point, to land infantry, and to secure another dense network of the fortifications. So one of the geolocations was located exactly in this area. The Russians most likely captured these trenches, which means that the Russians are getting closer and closer to the T05-18 road, and if the Russians are able to do this once again, Velyka Novosilka would be cut from the north. So this is the situation on the flanks. So this is the western flank, this is the northeastern flank. The situation is very difficult, but we also see that the Russians are advancing from the southeastern direction, and this is, let's say, the central direction of Russian attack. So this is it. As for this direction, as you can see, the Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainians between two rivers, the river of Kashlygach and the river of Shaitanka. So these are two rivers, and the Russians are trying to attack in this direction. And according to geolocations, the latest geolocations we've received and the map updates from different mappers, either the Russians managed to take the farms under complete control or they're about to do this. So let's take a look at the video that was published by the pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video, we can see Ukrainian FPV drone that was attacking the Russian units heading towards the Velyka Novosilka between two rivers. And we see several attacks. Some of the vehicles of the armored force of Russian Federation were damaged. Some of them probably managed to reach some lines. A lot of episodes, and one of the episodes of Ukrainian FPV drone attack took place exactly in this point. So the Russians managed to answer these trenches, this tree line, and using these tree line, most likely the Russians will try to move further the northern direction with the purpose to take under control these farms. As for different mappers, the pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians managed to take under control already up to 30% of these farms and these barracks. We're talking about the northeastern part, this one. So let's take a look at how the map was changing in between the 2 days. So this is the situation by the end of the 23rd of November. This is the situation by the beginning of the 24th of November. So this is the situation, and now let's discuss what is going to be next. Obviously, the Russians will try to take this farm under complete control, and they will continue advancing further in the northwestern direction between two rivers. What is the main problems for the Ukrainians in this direction? I'm not saying that this attack of the armored force of Russian Federation is going to be very easy. Obviously, the Russians will suffer losses, but the problem is that the settlement of Velyka Novosilka is cut in many pieces due to these rivers. There are three rivers in this area. There is a river of Kashlygach, there is a river of Shaitanka, and there is a river of Mokre Yale, and the central part of Velyka Novosilka is located between these three rivers. The rivers are very big. They're not like big as very big, but obviously to cross these rivers you need to have special equipment. You need to have either bridges or special equipment to do this. And when talking about the central part of Velyka Novosilka, this is exactly the area the Russians are heading to, and we see that this part has connections with different parts with several bridges. If we calculate the bridges, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bridges in this area. And if the Russians are able to take under control this part of Velyka Novosilka, so everything that located in the southeastern part between these two rivers, then the Ukrainians in the central part will have significant problems, because I believe that probably today or the day after or tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, so these days, this weekend, most likely we will start receiving updates and videos of how the Russians destroy Ukrainian bridges in Velyka Novosilka. And as soon as the Russians begin destroying the Ukrainian bridges, this is going to tell us that the situation is critical, the final storm is about to be started, and we can start counting minutes probably or hours before the Ukrainians would be completely defeated, or at least they would be forced to leave the central part, and after the fall of the central part there are no chances for the Ukrainians to hold their lines completely. So this is the situation. The battle for Velyka Novosilka is very important. important once again because this town is the flank both for Kurakhove direction and for Gulyai-Polye direction. Without this flank, or if this flank collapses, then the Ukrainians collapses, then this is going to be a very huge problem for the Ukrainians. So this is the situation. We are waiting for additional updates in upcoming day, and most likely we're going to get them. Now let's talk about the battle for the Uspenovka stronghold. Today we got a lot of very interesting updates, and the most important, we have different changes on map according to pro-Ukrainian sources. The pro-Ukrainian service, map service Deep State, reported that the Russians managed to break through the Ukraine defense belt between the villages of Yelizavetovka, Ilinka and Romanovka, and to take significant number of territories under their control. Furthermore, we got report that in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Ilinka, the units of the 79th Brigade were encircled by the Russians, so they were caught in Cauldron. I'm not sure where exactly these units were caught in Cauldron, but I believe that the reports are coming exactly about from these trenches and the fortifications. As for the, once again, as for the Deep State, their reports, the Russians managed to improve their positions. We see this, but also I would like to point your attention that the territory of Yelizavetovka, Romanovka, Antonovka either under complete Russian control or in the gray zone, which confirms that they don't know for sure what exactly is going to happen today. So the situation is very critical. Let's take a look at how the situation was developing during the previous several days, and we see that the Russians since the 19th of November were attacking mainly on using these roads of attack in the direction of Romanovka. So that was a breakthrough operation. So this is the first changes on map, this is the second, this is the third small advance along this tree line, and this is the fourth update. And as a result of this breakthrough, the Russians entered the territory of Romanovka itself and basically cut the Ukrainians here from the mainland. Also would like to point your attention to the situation that is currently developing in the southeastern part of Uspenovka. In this video that was published by the Russians, we can see another Ukrainian vehicle that was moving either in the direction of the villages along the Sukhiy Yale river or back. It doesn't matter. The most important, what matters is that the Russians destroyed this vehicle as a result of FPV drone attack. So the value of this video is that if we increase the numbers of days since the beginning of November, you might see a very huge focus of the armored force of Russian Federation exactly in this part of the village. So exactly in the area of the main logistic roads that goes between the villages along Sukhiy Yale river and the village of Uspenovka itself. So the Russians established complete control over the main supply roads, and the Ukrainians were caught in Cauldron a long time ago, not today, not yesterday, not the day before yesterday. They were caught at least into operational encirclement probably 2 weeks ago when we started receiving first videos exactly from this part of the village. So the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult, and we're talking about several thousand of Ukrainian soldiers in this territory. And now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Kurakhove itself. Today we start receiving reports from pro-Ukrainian sources that the Russians continue advancing in the central part of the settlement, and according to information we have, by the morning of the 24th of November, the main clashes, the main activities were taking place around the school number 5. So according to sources, different resources, currently both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to fight for this strategical point. The Russians are trying to take this territory under complete control and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. So we see that the final part of the middle part or the final part for the central part of Kurakhove has begun. Furthermore, we have reports that the Russians most likely managed to finish the battle for the village of Berestki and to secure the territory completely. Maybe today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us this information. As for now, this Russian control over the village of Berestki was confirmed both by pro-Ukrainian mappers and pro-Russian mappers. So let's wait for additional updates, but most likely the settlement was captured by the Russians. Now let's talk about Selidova. The Russians managed to break through the Ukraine defense belt in several places, and the Russians continue advancing in the western and the northwestern directions. What is the current status? The Russians, as a result of offensive operation and according to different mappers, managed to improve their positions to the west of Novoalexeyevka and to reach the outskirts of the settlement of Pushkina. The Ukrainians are saying that the eastern part of the settlement of Pushkina is already in the gray zone, which means that the first sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of Russian Federation probably entered the territory of the settlement. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions on the line between the villages of Pietrikovka and in the direction of the northwestern part of Pushkina. So this line was also captured by the Russians. Furthermore, this line was secured and completely became under complete Russian control. So at least that was stated by pro-Ukrainian sources. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions and the Russians began advancing on the line between Pietrikovka and Zhovtne. Also, this information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian mappers. And we have additional changes on the ground along the M30 road. As for this case, the Russians are moving from the city of Selidovo along the M30 road in the direction of the settlement by the name of Dachensky. So currently we can't tell for sure what exactly we can see right now in front of our screens. Just let's say regular or additional retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine and maintaining of the gray zone by the Russian side, or we can see the beginning of another Russian offensive operation in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk itself, with the purpose to outflank the settlement from the south and from the southwest. So we'll follow this situation, but this might be another disaster for the Ukrainians. So once again, and summarizing this entire direction, we can tell that most likely today, on the 24th of November, we're going to receive such a piece of news that will tell us that disaster has begun, either in the village of Velyka Novosilka, either in the village of Uspenovka, or in the village town of Kurakhove, or to the west of Selidovo. But somewhere on one of these directions, the situation can become very, very critical. Basically can turn into the disaster. Now let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar. There are very heavy clashes and the main battles are continuing at the refractory plant. The Russian armed forces also want to bypass it from the south through the high-rise buildings. Accordingly, they have claimed into the frontal attack on the city center. So there are very heavy clashes right now, but we've been receiving this kind of updates for the previous several days. So which means that most likely the Ukrainians still have strong positions there, and it's not very easy to walk through this area. And we start receiving first videos from the Kramatorsk and Slavyansk agglomerations. In this video we can see how the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces and how the Russians destroyed them with the different missiles with the cluster rounds. So which means that the Russians are not just advancing, the Russians also trying to destroy the concentration of Ukrainian forces and their reserves. So the situation is very critical, and the reason and the most important thing that Zelensky today reported that the Russian armed forces want to oust the Ukrainian armed forces from the Kursk region by the Trump's inauguration on January 28th. But I believe that this is not just about Kursk. I believe that the Russians, for some reason, want to take as much as possible before this date. It's not just about the Kursk direction, it's about everything. And which means that maybe Trump indeed have some possibilities to stop the Russians, or to slow them down, or to freeze the conflict for unknown period of time. So let's wait and we will see anyway. And the most important thing, that during the previous night, the Ukrainians conducted several drone attacks in the Kursk region. Those were drones. Some sources reported that Ukrainians attacked the territory of Russia with ATACMS missiles, but those were speculations. They were attacking Russian territory just with drones, but it also means something, because you know that first the Ukrainians tried to test the Russian air defense, and after to stress and to test it, and after the Russians begin reloading process, the Ukrainians usually attack the territory with the Storm Shadows or ATACMS missiles. So we should expect probably another attack in the Kursk direction, and then maybe we will see another in action. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.